As a former nuclear submarine officer and having spent a significant portion of your life in the military, in your opinion, what is it specifically about the military that prepares people to step into their leadership capabilities?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the first thing that everyone has to understand, and what I learned in the military, was that they had a belief in me that I could be a leader.
Yeah.
And when we think about, it doesn't matter whether I came in as an officer, but it doesn't matter whether you come in as a very young person, as an enlisted person, you are expected to be a leader, and you have leadership qualities and tools that are inside of you. And so that's the first step. They have to open up their mindset to just say, hey, you are a leader. So that's number one. Number two is, I think what the military does really well, and I think what a lot of companies are moving towards right now, is they have an internal leadership academy that teaches someone like, hey, we want you to be a leader way up here, but here's the steps that you need to take to be able to do that. And so what they do is they chunk it up and they ladder it, and they say, here's the actual, process that you have to follow if you want to be able to do that. So they set you up for success, and then it's on you to really hit those marks. And then the third thing is, you can talk about leadership all you want, but when you're on a mission critical to national security, everything that you thought you knew could go out the window because stress sets in, you get extremely nervous, fear sets in. And so how do you take and make sure that when anything happens, that you are able to, meet what's going on and be able to do that? So I think it's those three things, because, it's about action.
Yeah.
And not just talking about things. And I think they do a really great job of that. And that's what allows, like the military, that's what allows the military to be extremely successful.
Systematizing the curriculum, so to speak, of creating leaders is something they've done really well.
Fantastic job. And look, it's built out of, for the Navy, it's built out of 230 years of people, being on the seas. And how do you lead people in dynamically changing situations and environments? And then how do you help people rise up? So
prior to the military, did you view yourself as a leader?
I don't think so. Yeah, I always thought like, hey, that's someone else's job. That's the other person's job, or that's that person's job. Or, hey, maybe in some areas of my life, I was a leader. I was captain on the soccer team, but, they gave me an armband, and I think it's because I was one of the better players. I didn't really view myself as a leader. And to be frank with you, when I got into the Nuclear Submarine Force, the first couple of weeks, I felt like an imposter, to be frank with you. I was like, oh crap, like what did I just sign up for? Because they're saying that they want me to get up here, and I'm way down here right now. But then they gave me the next step and the next step. They said, just focus on the next step. So I think, it's something that we all have to go through and have that understanding that we can be a better leader. And once you open up that mindset for yourself, then you allow the journey to take place. So
the thing that's coming up for me that I'm thinking about in this scenario right here is the difference between quote unquote success and failure. Reason being is, so often in life, I think we're conditioned to believe that failure is the scary thing. And it's actually the failures that we go through in life that lead us to where we're meant to go. And I'm sure we'll get plenty into alignment on things today. But it's the fear of success that I think is a more pervasive thing than anything else. Because in order for you to get somewhere you haven't been, you need to do something you've never done. And we failed our whole lives. We failed to walk before we did. We failed to whatever it was before we did. And as you share that, in the academy and then in training, it seemed like they gave you the rung to allow you to step to the next level of success, allow your body to catch up, meaning my mind sees where I'm going. I can feel that peace. But the thing is, once you get to that next level, the imposter syndrome, that imposter feeling sets in because you go, oh shit, this is new to me. Right. I don't belong here.
Yeah.
Walk me through that belief expansion period for you, specifically when you were entering the Navy.
Yeah. So I get into the Navy, get accepted to it, and I go to the nuclear power school down in Orlando, Florida. Now they take 18 months of curriculum on nuclear power, and they have you go through the entire curriculum in 6 months. And so it is extremely fast paced. So I would share with you in the first test that I have, they say, draw the nuclear power plant. I draw the entire nuclear power plant, draw all the valves. And we're talking afterwards with some of the other people who are in the class with me. I was like, oh, I nailed it. Just nailed it. Next day, I get the test back. I got an 18 out of 100 on it. And there's these marks all over the thing, all over the paper. And I'm looking at it like 18 out of 100. Like I thought I nailed it. I go up to the teacher afterwards and I said, hey, I'm looking at the key and then I'm looking at my paper. They look exactly the same. And then he says to me, well, Mr. Koehler, if you take a look at the valves that you drew on there, how does it look differently from the key? I said, well, there's a circle on there that's not colored in. That means it fails open. And if it's colored in, it fails shut. And I said, well, I can put those all in right now. I know them all. And he says, Mr. Koehler, what you have to understand is that when we're out at sea and we're on a submarine, when there's a fire that breaks out, or there's flooding that happens, and there's 2,500 valves that are on the submarine, I need to know that you know whether that valve fails open and fails shut. You don't get a second chance at that. And I said, but I'll draw all the valves right now, and I'll do it perfectly. And he said, have a good day, Mr. Koehler. And so that was the experience that I was brought into. Now, what that did is it gave me an understanding of the standard that I needed to get to. Now, I had to fight my way the entire 6 months. I started last in the class because of that, and to fight my way all the way to the top. And so what they did is they set an extremely high standard. But the next day, when I was walking with that instructor, he just said, hey, I hope you understand, where I'm coming from and why I'm doing that. And he told me the why behind it. And that was really, really important. Not just that, hey, you failed this test. When he told me the why behind it, I understood it better. And then it allowed me to be successful. And I think in the submarine force, we had that. They put you in a situation, you would fail, and they would want to make sure that you would learn from that. So that was a really important point. Like a lot of people think, well, hey, I just failed and there was no follow-up with it. I mean, that's really powerful. And so knowing that they cared that I could get to the next step, that gave me the fuel to really go, hey, I am going to take that next step. Instead of just sitting there and going like, oh, I suck.
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
what I mean?
So it's almost intentional failure in order to get you to learn the lesson they want, and then they revisit it with the why later on.
Right. And then what that does is it sets the entire standard of when I'm looking at other things, and say we have another test where I have to draw another system that's I know that I have to draw it to such detail, but there's a why behind it. They're not just being a jerk. There's a why behind it, because when you get to the submarine, you're 400 feet below the surface, the entire submarine can fill with smoke in 1 minute. So we have to have an understanding of, hey, how do we make sure that we do that right and we do it right the first time?
Why do you feel, so setting a standard is obviously an extremely important piece, and the military has 230 years, as you mentioned, in order to figure out where these standards exist and what levels and where to push people to.
Sure.
Where, from a leadership capability of looking at the person you need to lead most as yourself, where does one learn what to set as a standard for themselves? Or how do you view setting standards internally?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that really helped me to set my standard was when I was in the submarine force, it was such a high standard. And what I was able to see how that led to us being able to operate at the highest levels. So it wasn't just setting a really high standard. When we were on missions critical to national security, and someone, quote unquote, someone comes out of your baffles and it's an enemy submarine, like there's a massive, like, oh shit, like, oh crap, I can't believe this just happened. I was able to see, because the standard was set so high, I was able to see how I was able to react to that. And my wife even says this to me today. She's like, wow, when like crap hits the fan, you go into this meditative state And the reason I'm able to go into that meditative state is because it was training. It was over and over and over. Someone comes out of the baffles, this is how you handle it. And so I think when the standard was set really high, that was one thing. But then to see how we were able to operate at a really high level and in dynamically changing environments, I think that made me realize you have to set a really high standard. So that's one thing. Number two is I think it's different for everyone. I think we have to really go back to, hey, what's your purpose in life? Have you found your why behind what you want to do? And then from that, standards might be different in different areas, but it's about setting the standard for yourself. And I talk about, 3 different areas. There's a personal standard. What is it for mind, body, and spirit? What are you looking at? I think because I have a family, there's a standard for our family. How do I want to be the best husband? How do I want to be the best father that I can be? And then I think there's work. And, how do I want to be the best leader? So that when people come to work at Lead with Purpose, that they wake up in the morning with a sense of purpose and they leave each day with a feeling of accomplishment. So I think if you can take and look at these 3 different areas of your life, your standard might be the same for all 3 of them. It might be a really high standard, but there might be something you do a little bit differently in each, we call them 3 branches of life.
Yeah.
There might be something that you do a little bit differently. And then it's just about doing it and then finding out exactly what works for you.
Repetition being the mother of skill there, and then iterating to see what works and what doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as an example, what I used to do is I used to do gratefulness in the morning, 15 minutes of gratefulness. Yeah. I don't do that. I do it at the end of the day. And the reason I do it at the end of the day is I end the day on my terms. Sometimes I start the day off and say, here's the 3 things that I really want to dive into and delve into. And my day will go to crap. I won't get any of those 3 things done. And I'll end the day looking at my list again going, didn't get those things done. When I do gratefulness and I make myself look at the day and say, what did I learn out of it? Who did I have an interaction with that I really enjoyed? I end the day on my terms. So just as an example, we should all be practicing gratefulness. There's tremendous benefits to it. I initially had learned about practicing it in the morning, but then just my experience was like, hey, it's better for me if I practice it at the end of the day. So I think there's a set of, skills and tools that everyone should take a look at and then just figure out what works for you.
Did you have any quantitative data that proved that it was better for you at the end of the day, or is that just an internal feeling of how it felt doing it at the end of the day?
At the end of the day, obviously gratefulness takes you away from fear. You can't have fear and grateful and fear, right? So what it did is it made me look at the day and made me evaluate what did I learn, and look, if I didn't learn anything, like what came out of what happened, it could be a massive disaster. And so what it does is it just shifts my mindset. And so there's tremendous data. You probably know all the data as it relates to being grateful and how it changes your mindset and releases, the oxytocin or some of the other hormones. But what it did is it made me look, because at the end of the day, I could either walk from my office into the house and carry all of that with me, or I could say, hey, you know what? Nothing went right today, but these 3 things, I'm grateful that they happened.
It's interesting. The reason I ask about the data piece is because I had a very, very similar experience. So I obviously wear a wearable now, but I track basically everything that I do. And we'll get into some of the systems that I have in my own life. Yeah. But one of the things that I do in the spreadsheet that I have, it used to be 1 lesson, 1 tension, 1 gratitude. And I would do that every single day. And I would do it sometimes like before dinner if I was trying not to be on screens or anything late at night. And then I shifted it to doing it right before I went to bed, reflecting back on the day and thinking of things.
So you do it at the end of the day too?
Right before I'm going to sleep, basically.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll do it at the end of the day. And on the days that I feel that gratitude, like I bring that gratitude back up and I feel it before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
My heart rate variability, my HRV, is 8 to 10 points higher that next morning, and I sleep better. There was also a study done showing resiliency in partners. So they tracked partners where husband and wife. The husband would get up, leave the room, never kiss his wife on the forehead before they left for the day, and she would have lower resiliency scores on that day. She isn't conscious that any of that is even happening.
Right.
But husband gets out of bed, kisses the wife on the forehead, goes on with the day. Her resiliency, quote unquote, how they're ranking that, is higher that day because she feels that she's in a mutual connection with someone else, even if her body knows that, even if her mind doesn't.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, and I stumbled upon these things. And so one of the things that I do at the end of the day is if I had an interaction with someone, what I'll do is I'll just reach out to them. I say, hey, I'm reviewing my day. I'm just grateful for our time together. And it's nothing like I'm grateful for our time together. I'll send the proposal over, right?
Where's the transaction coming?
Right,
yeah.
right. So it really is from a place of true gratefulness. And I just started doing that because I wanted to do that and let that person know that they made an impact in my day, especially when the days go to crap, right? You just go like, okay, that was the one shining light that happened in the day and I did it. And the response is just amazing. Just amazing. Like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Because I just don't think we, recognize each other or provide gratefulness, between humans enough. And so getting that response back is, that fortifies for me that, hey, I should continue doing this because that's what the world probably needs.
Are there any other habits or tips or inputs that you have that you've been able to stumble upon or have found their way into your life that have had a similar impact like that?
Yeah, I think, and look at this, I didn't create this. I just took someone else's idea. But at the end of the day, before I do gratefulness, what I'll do is I'll just evaluate my day. How did I do? And, it's super helpful because I'll be sitting there going, well, I didn't get that done, but I spent, 48 minutes on Instagram. Like, why did I do that? So it's a daily evaluation. And what I'll do is I'll look at the top 3 things that I wanted to try to get accomplished. Maybe I'll get 1 and 2 done. And maybe the third one I'll look at and I'll create my list for tomorrow. So what I'll do is I'll take that third one and I'll put it over here on another list and I'll create another 2 things. And so subconsciously in my mind, when I get up in the morning, so I get up early in the morning, like 4:35. When I get up in the morning, I'm not trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I don't even go to email. And so that's been like really, really helpful, is to be able to, that continuous cycle of at the end of the day and then doing gratefulness. When I wake up the next morning, say for example, I'm working on the second version of my book. And that's going to be one of the things I'm working on. I'll make sure that the manuscript is right out there for me. And I just go straight into it. Because if I go into the email sphere, right, we're just going to get bombarded. I'm going to get distracted. And so I think that's like a huge thing for me. I didn't create that, but that helps me to stay extremely focused. And subconsciously, I think in my mind, as I'm resting and sleeping, I think it's subconsciously my mind is probably working on, hey, this is what the day's going to look like.
There's multiple. I love the science behind a lot of these things too. And there's,
we'll share. I'd love to hear it.
There's the thing called the Zeigarnik effect, which is where you end something in the middle of doing it and your subconscious goes to work to solve the problem. So whatever problem it is that you're giving your mind to solve is what it will go to work for.
Right.
So if you're constantly in this fight or flight, stress-induced state where everything that you're doing is leading you towards some form of negativity or some form of complaint or some form of victimhood, it's solving problems, but for the wrong thing that you want it to, which is why, again, inputs with the podcast, whatever you're consuming dictates the outcome that you have as well. Right. So, and that's not just consuming food, that's consuming television, that's consuming radio, that's consuming music, that's consuming friendships, that's consuming everything that you do in your life. And then if we go even farther down, like the whole Joe Dispenza track, environment shapes the gene. And if you start to think about how crazy that is, the environment that you're allowing yourself to be in is dictating how your body is responding.
Right.
And if we then take ourselves out of that, you can recognize that if I want to be here in life and I'm sitting over here, well, all we got to do is make a little pivot and get away from some of the things that we were doing,
right? Which
then goes in line with my belief is that growth is a game of subtraction, not addition.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the best form of self-control to grow is removing yourself from locations where you need it.
Right. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
I do have one other thing that as it relates to leadership, because I think we complicate leadership. One of the tools that we teach is it's called Engage, Empower, and Encourage. And what we do is in the morning, you write down on a piece of paper the word engage, and you write down the word empower, write down the word encourage. And we call it an E3 leadership approach. I think you have M that you were using for some of the masterpiece and yeah. So E4. So we have 3 E's, and this is extremely powerful because I think we complicate leadership. And what we say is at the end of the day, just evaluate yourself in those 3 areas. As a leader, did you engage someone? Did you have one conversation where you connected someone, either an employee or a client or anyone that you came in, connected them to the mission of your company and the reason they're doing what they're doing, how they're making a difference in the world? Just one. The second thing is, did you empower someone? Did you spend enough time with them? And I think in the sauna, we were talking about questions. Did you ask someone a question back? Instead of telling them the answer, did you ask them one question back? And then did you guided decision-making? Did you help guide them to the answer? So in the future, they're going to be able to be empowered to make that decision themselves. And then the final thing is, did you encourage someone? Did you recognize someone for the great work they're doing? And so, that's a great habit to establish. Did I engage someone? Did I empower someone? And did I encourage someone? And what we find is leaders, when they start doing this, they'll write down, first couple of weeks, they'll write down 1 in each area. But then they'll start seeing the response from the people who they're interacting with, and start doing 2 in each area and 3. And this simple habit, then you don't have to track it anymore. It just becomes a part of who you are as a leader and how you show up for your team. And that's what the world really needs: engage, empower, and encourage.
How much of the leadership training that you do is very much systemized and regimented, similar to the military, and how much of it is case by case based on the organization or the individual?
Well, I think it's a structured, but it's unstructured. It's a structured unstructured, and the components of it's like any recipe. If we're going to make bread, there's certain components that you have to have as part of the bread, and but then you can, add different things to it if you're going to make it a rye bread or white bread or one of those things. So I think there's a structure to it, and there's 7 components that we believe every company needs to have, but then they might describe it just a little bit differently. If you want me to, I can show those.
Please double click.
Yeah. So the first thing is, and this goes with engage, you have to get really clear. We call it a brand purpose. It's your mission statement. You have to get very, very clear on your mission statement. And your mission statement isn't 42 words long. It's a code word that's one or 2 words. And I got this from the submarine force. So that's number 1. Number 2 is values. What are the top 5 values that you have? Roy Disney famously said, when your values are clear, your decisions are easy. And as we operate in this dynamically changing world today, if we were to try to figure out all the chaos that's going to happen today, and I needed to put together a manual of the exact processes and steps that we all needed to follow, it would be this thick every day, and we couldn't think through every situation. And so we have to lean into our values and be able to ask people, hey, we have one of our values is strive for excellence. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 of how you did on that, right? And they say a 2, then you ask them another question. What do you need to do to get to a 4? And that's the coaching that we need. So the second is detail the top 5 values. The third piece is called blue sky vision. If we were to get into the DeLorean from Back to the Future and type in 5 years into the future, and we came out, the smoke was all over the place, right? And maybe I'm the crazy professor. What does it look like? What does your company look like? And what's the impact that it's made? Everybody has to have a very clear vision of that. So those are the first 3 components. We call that your inspiring story. What's the reason you exist, the difference you make in the world, what are your top 5 values, and what does it look like? What's the impact you've made 5 years in the future? Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Next is a basic SWOT analysis. You have to understand what your strengths are, understand what your weaknesses are. And then I think it's important for us to have an understanding of what's happening externally to us, but we have no control over that. And so we can't spend a lot of time on opportunities and threats, which are external. So that's the SWOT analysis. Then we believe there are goals that are set that cascade over 3 different time periods. One is 3 years. We call those long-term goals. Then underneath that are annual goals. And then underneath that are 90-day goals by department. And so what that looks like is every department goal links up to one of the annual goals. Every annual goal has to link to the 3-year goal. The 3-year goal helps to bring the 5-year vision to life, and the 5-year vision helps you to bring your purpose to life. If you have that set up and extremely clear, anyone can look at the 90-day goals that they're working on, see how what they do connects up to making a difference in the world. And this was a crazy statistic for me when I did my first turnaround. Harvard Business Review said that 95% of people don't understand how what they do today connects to the company's long-term success. I was shocked. And I had just come out of the Navy where all 110 of us were laser focused, aligned, knew exactly why we were doing what we were doing. And if we weren't there, what potentially, would happen for our country. And so I believe that the tools that we're using leadership-wise, I believe that strategic plans that are 20 pages long and 30 pages long, you pay a lot of money for those, they weigh a lot, and you're like, oh yeah, this is really good. We make sure you distill it all down to a single page. And I got all of that from the submarine force. We had the best technology in the world. Best technology in the world. A lot of AI stuff that's out right now. A lot of stuff this is early 90s. None of that would work unless people were highly trained. They felt that they were a leader, and that we had the best people. None of the technology matters. And so what we're seeing is that in businesses today, we're not really clear on the mission statement. It's 42 words long. I'll ask a CEO this. I'll say, hey, how's your mission statement? They go, oh, it's fantastic. And I'll say, well, what is it? And they'll do this. Try to grab the binder from behind, right, and open it up, and they'll read it. And I say, how many people know it? They go, oh yeah, everyone deeply connected to it. I say, okay, let's go walk around. And you see the look on their face. They know that they don't know that. But it's extremely important that those 7 components exist, because I believe 95% of people not understanding how what they do connects to making a difference in the world is causing the massive employee engagement statistics. Think about it. 70% of people are working today not loving their jobs, not connected to purpose. That's a shame.
It's fascinating how there's so many common threads where within leadership and within these 7 categories that you're speaking on that I've discovered in different ways leading up to this point in my life. I'll give you an example.
Yes.
I read Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold 4 or 5 years ago. And it's a very similar thing, I think slightly longer than it needs to be.
Yeah.
It's a 3-page, not a 1-page. I very much like the one sheet that can go. But what it is it's future pacing the vision you have for the company in a way that you distill where you're at in 3 to 5 years, who's with you, what the media says, where your financial goals are at, all these pieces. And then what you do is you post it in your office or wherever you're at, the whole company has access to it. And as soon as you achieve one of those pieces, you highlight it. And so you have this finalized product and you're working in reverse and you're highlighting all the pieces so that by the time you get to the 3 to 5 year mark, the thing should be fully highlighted because you've accomplished all the things. But what it does is then it aligns people on a shared mission. And similar to the mission statement thing, one of the things we spoke a little bit about my past with Hyatt hotels.
Right.
One of the things I really liked with them was their entire ethos is to care for people so they can be their best.
Oh, they're fantastic. Yeah.
That's it.
And you can remember that.
Correct.
And you can emotionally connect to it.
Correct. And that was the reason I wanted to get back into hospitality and run resorts myself, was because I wanted to give people a place to go to find home. And if we talk about my mom, when I lost my mom, I felt like I lost home. because I felt like I lost myself. And I wanted a place in my life where I could go to reconnect with others and reconnect with myself, because I felt like that was gone. And there have been a lot of opportunities that have been presented to me that have allowed me to get to where I am today. I think because because I've focused on what feels right and is aligned to me personally. And then to be able to create a space where I can give others the ability to do the same is what interests me the most. And like we talked about how everything you do in the past leads you to where you're meant to go next. I'm grateful for those years at Hyatt, because that instilled something in me on a corporate level that was relational based and not transactional. But growing up, I thought everything you do in business is meant to be, what can I get from you?
Yeah. Well, and if you really think about it, when someone is 5 or 6 years old, is their passion, is their deep passion, to make sure that the profitability of a company is at a certain level, or scrap levels aren't this, or I've won this many contracts. No, it's not. At this really deep level. And I think what really the Gen Y and Gen Z has done they've stood up and said, hey, look, I'm not going to stay at a place where those things are the prevalent things. I want to be at a place where what I'm doing is making a difference in the world. And the talk of the vision as it relates to, what was done, and you put it on a piece of paper and you start marking it off, then you start showing people like, hey, here's where we're going many years in the future. And actually we're making steps towards that. And then you course correct to success, all the way towards it. We believe those are the two most if the 7 things are really important, definitely have to have people understanding how what they do makes a difference in the world. We call it a brand purpose. The next most important aspect of that is the 90 days. And if people know those 2 things, and then they know that it connects up, then that's the most powerful thing. We find so many leaders, and less so now, really spending a lot of time going, hey, what does the next 180 days look like? What does the next year fully look like? Or the next 2 or 3 years? That's an absolute waste of time. Because here's what I can guarantee you. In the next 90 days, something's going to happen in the world that's going to totally shift everything. So how do you keep that long-term North Star, but then how do you just really laser focus on the next 90 days? That's what, of those 7 things, those are the 2 things most important.
Taking a quick break from this episode to remind you that your inputs matter. This show was designed and created to help you build a high-performing, healthy, wealthy life. So if you feel that you're getting value from this episode, please go ahead and share it with someone that you feel would get value as well. Now, fun fact, 90% of listeners of this show are not actually subscribed to the podcast. So if you would take a moment and go ahead and tap the subscribe button, it would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for being here. Now back to the show. What have you found within the companies that do it best in terms of retaining top-tier talent?
So we asked this question before we even start working with companies. And the reason we asked this question is because we got a lot of scars on our back. And we asked 2 questions to the CEO. How important is it on a scale of 1 to 10 to have engaged employees? 10 is like highly important. 1 is I don't really care about that. If someone answers anything less than an 8, big red flag goes up. And then when we start asking them, I'll start asking them further questions. I want to make sure they understood the question.
What would be the psyche that they would have if it was less than an 8? Why would they believe that?
Well, believe it or not, Liesl and I were on a call several months ago and asked that question, and the woman said it's a 4. And I said, okay. And so I'll ask the question again. I'm not sure they heard the question right. Okay, so I want to make sure I understand. You say that it's it's only a 4 out of 10. And she said, you know what, all that stuff about purpose, I think it's just hogwash. I said, and then I was like, okay. And I asked, well, why? Why do you think that? She goes, I just think it's, people don't have purpose, and it's their excuse not to work really hard. And so, you know what I said during next? I said, hey, you know what? our business and our framework is based upon having engaged employees. We're going to do a lot of things that are going to get your employees engaged. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not pixie dust. So you're going to have to continue to work at this. And I don't think that we are the right program for you. I can actually make a introduction for another program that might help you. And she goes, no. I believe in purpose as long as I see it dropping profit to the bottom line, right? And so Lisa and I were on the phone on a Zoom call. We're sitting there trying to, bite our tongue and everything. We got off the call. So that's the first question that I ask. And I've got a lot of horrible experiences where I've had that, and then I've pushed forward and said, hey, I can turn them around, and really could. The second question that we asked that's really critical is, how open are you to learning? Because leadership, you never get there. Leadership is a journey that you are learning every single day. And I'll do that till I leave this great earth. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, how open are you learning? And the reason for that is someone will say, we'll say, hey, you should do a daily 15-minute meeting. And they'll say, well, we tried a daily 15-minute meeting. And are you willing to try the daily 15-minute meeting from the submarine force, which is really steeped in making sure your team comes together, that you're building bonds of trust, rebuilding those every single day? If you're not willing to retry it with our agenda, then there's going to be a failure. And I think one thing that I see all the time, Kevin, is as it relates to, there'll be an article that comes out and says, hey, if you want to really drive engagement, you have to recognize your employees. Every employee needs to be recognized once a month. And I think when leaders look at that, they say, okay, let's just start recognizing everyone once a month. And what that is that's just one of the components of the entire ecosystem of what it takes to really create engaged employees. Because they'll say, hey, if you recognize once a month, then engagement levels are at 66%, which is world-class levels. But those companies that recognize employees once a month, they also have made sure that those employees are connected to the mission, that they have personal and professional development plans, that they've pushed decision-making down. And so there's an entire ecosystem of things you need to do. Now, if you look at the bottom of that email, it'll say, this is by ABC Company, which is a recognition system company, right? And so I think as leaders, we get lured, into that. So I think, when I take a look at what does it mean to have fully engaged employees and have people fully connected, we have to take a look at 8, 9 different things that you're doing every single day that really help to drive it.
Did you ever find out what her purpose was?
We didn't ask any further. I mean, she came from an accounting background. And so she was very much by the numbers and analytical. And I believe when people are in that situation, even though we tell, everybody, hey, you have a leadership toolkit inside, that feels really squishy to a lot of people and it feels very uncomfortable. She's more used to, hey, got to make sure that the numbers support it. And she didn't feel comfortable really going down that path.
Do you think that that's rooted in nothing? There's no positive or negative on either side. Do you think that's rooted in the lack of self-awareness of herself? The reason I ask is because what I've found personally for me is the times that I was trying to do something or force something outside of what was in alignment was because I believed it would get me something that I didn't have or didn't exist, or it would get me significance, or it would get me importance, or it would whatever it ended up being, or it was connected to certainty. And certainty is a huge driver for a lot of people because if you say numbers are the way through and that's what you're used to, then we're certain that these 1 + 1 = 2, and then you're not able to view the world through the lens of this gray area or freedom in flux, so to speak.
Yeah. I don't know her exact situation, but a lot of times what happens is that's how she was led. So what we do is, without really going to any type of training course or anything, she might have been led in that manner too. And that's what the tools that she's picked up. Leadership is squishy. Leadership, there's even though there's a process that's involved in it, you have to be able to show your emotion. You have to be able to tap into other people's and other humans. And a lot of people feel really uncomfortable with that. Now, what we say is, are you left-handed or right-handed?
Right.
Yeah, you're right-handed. So what happens is when people try to go into leadership, it'd be like me telling you, you can't write with your right hand anymore. You have to write with your left hand. What actually happens? It feels really uncomfortable. So what do you want to do? You just want to go back to the thing that you feel really comfortable with. But what you'll find out is if every single day you started writing with your left hand, after 45, 60 days, you would become really good at that. And so that's one of the things that we really try to push across is that the number one skill that we all have is the ability to learn. And so a lot of us feel uncomfortable when we're doing it. I think it becomes a little bit of an excuse too, because when you're actually putting yourself out there as a leader and you're tapping into your emotional part, you're engaging people, you're empowering them, you're encouraging them. It becomes a little bit of an excuse to say, hey, I can't do that. It feels uncomfortable. And what you find out is if you just continue doing that every single day, is that's where you get the massive success.
Yeah. The completely off topic anecdote to the writing with right and left hands. Daniel Day-Lewis won an Oscar for My Left Foot. And he did the entire opening scene where he was painting and drawing with only his left foot, because that was what the character had done.
Right.
And he locked himself in a room for, I think it was 6 months, and super method, and painted the entire opening scene, one take, no cuts, doing everything with his left foot.
Yeah. Yeah. There's all these things with neural pathways and how you build up, to become an expert, 10,000 hours. You can go through all these things. I think the biggest, we all started off and we couldn't walk, and we forget this. And I think that's the greatest leveler also. If we look at society and go like, hey, everyone has this tremendous toolkit inside, not only to be a great a leader, but we have this tremendous ability to learn. And I get asked this question all the time, like, is leadership learned, or is it something that we're just born with? And I would say the answer to that is yes to both, with the exception is it's not just a few people who are born with leadership. I think everyone's born with a leadership toolkit inside. And again, it's not what we don't have, it's what we don't use.
I want to double click on the toolkit in just a second, but the other piece that you said that was really interesting to me was from what they were led with perspective. We often even take family, for example. Your parents are doing the best that they can with what they've been given. And like you had talked about earlier, you were served something in a wrong way and you don't want that to then get passed down to your children.
Yeah.
What does the process for you look like to figure out what is no longer serving or what you don't want to then pass on, because at the time it was the best that they had, but now we have better information?
Yeah. Well, I look at it. So I'll just give you a clear example. Like, for my kids, I spanked my kids, and I look back on it now and I go, why did I do that? There's much better tools that are out there to do that. The reason I did that is because those are the skills and tools that I was brought up with. Look, my mom and dad didn't beat me and I didn't have that type of experience, but those are the skills and tools that I was taught. But then I started raising my kids in that manner, and I was using tools from 40 years earlier to raise my kids. I had enough awareness in the middle of doing that to say, that doesn't work. So I don't know if I can answer the question exactly. I just knew it was so far away from all the other experiences I was having in leading people and knowing that there's a better way to put a carrot out there instead of a stick. So, I think it's a self-reflection to be able to take a look at what are the actions that you're doing, and then what's the outcome you're trying to get to, and what's the outcome that you're getting. I'll just give you another example. I was brought up that you didn't leave the table until you ate all the food on a plate. So what did we do, my wife and I? Because that's how she was brought up. We had one of our daughters who hated chicken. And we said, you got to have a piece of chicken. And literally it was an hour and a half thing of her taking chicken, spitting it up, milk all over the place, And then we finally looked at each other and said, she doesn't eat chicken right now as a 3-year-old? Does it really matter? No. But I think those were some of the things that we did, is we reflected upon those things. I mean, you can go through multiple things. And so I think it's you taking a look at what's the outcome that you're trying to achieve. What's the outcome you're actually getting? And if those are close, then that's great. But being open to learning and knowing that there's a different way. I think that's probably the first thing. Just be open to take a look at what you're doing and evaluate yourself.
I had a very similar experience with my parents too.
Was it chicken or pork or what?
It was, my mom would spank the shit out of me, but
yeah.
My dad, she would always send my dad to do the dirty work. And he would go in there and he's like, I'm going to smack my leg.
Yeah.
And you yell when I smack my leg. And I'd be like, ah.
Yeah.
And then he also had a similar thing, the Italian side, where it was, you're not allowed up from the table until you finish your entire plate.
Right.
And when I was a child, he always wanted me, like I was very small until a junior in high school. And he always wanted me to eat and get big and grow and be strong. And I don't fault him for that. But he would always overplate me, like more food than I should ever have in front of me. And I think between like ages 8 to 10, my mom ended up putting on 20 pounds because she would steal food off my plate so that I could finish my food and get up from dinner.
So your mom and dad were helping you in different ways. Yeah.
But the interesting thing in that is I then learned how, in a way, I learned how to play them against each other.
Sure.
But I learned who to go to for what. And it's interesting how the experiences that you have lead into business, lead into relationships, lead into things that I went to school for theater, and I was best at improv because I was able to take the given circumstances from a situation and say, okay, I know to go to this person because I know exactly what their values are and what they want to be doing, and vice versa. So it was this really cool ability to read things as they are rather than what I think that they should be.
Right.
And then maneuver the conversation in order to get it to where I wanted it to go. Kind of manipulative.
Yeah.
But I think as long as the intentions and values and morality is there, I don't think it's a negative.
Yeah. As you were talking, one of the great things that we can do is obviously we can look in the mirror. That's really helpful. What's always helpful though is to get an outside perspective. So if you have the wherewithal to be able to have some type of coach that gives you that outside perspective, the famous saying in marketing is, you don't know what the label on the bottle looks like sitting inside of the bottle. And I think a lot of times we're sitting inside of the bottle, and once we finally take a step back, but someone who has your best interest in mind, they can give you feedback, and we have a lot of blind spots in our lives. So I think it's being really reflective. One other thing I would share is that at least once a month I really take a look at and spend some time just to be alone and really look at, hey, how'd this last month go? What are some of the things that went really well? What are some of the things that didn't go really well? And being able to give yourself that space and that time, because we're always so go. And, we're able to take a step back. Instead of being in the game, we can be on the sideline and take a look at the entire thing and say, oh yeah, I should do a little bit better there. But when we're in the moments and in the games, it can be really high. So having some time for reflection, besides having someone who might be some type of coach or mentor or like Yoda for you, I think is super powerful.
Yoda, I love that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the toolkit and your use it or lose it mentality.
So, so many times, people, I think, are afraid of leadership. And I think what we've done is we've complicated leadership. We always say that leadership is at the top of an organization. If you think of a typical organizational chart, or it's like, oh, we have to climb the ladder to get the leadership. So our philosophy is that everyone is a leader. And so I was having a conference, and there were at this company, it's a communications company. They have 1,300 people in their company. And so I'll always start off by asking them, hey, raise your hand here if you're a leader in your company. It's 1,300 people, like 20 people raise their hand in the audience. I go, okay, that's fine, right? And so by the end, because I talked to them about everyone is a leader, at the end, I'll ask them again, hey, who here is a leader in the company? And everyone raises their hand. And when I think about it, as it relates to leadership, it's not something that's very complex. It's something that's extremely simple. And I shared one of the pieces of it. The engage, empower, and encourage is a huge piece of that. Because when you engage someone, you connect them to how they make a difference in the world, then they're going to open up their heart and they'll invite discipline in. I'll share with you one story that I had as a turnaround CEO. I was at a wire manufacturing company, and I noticed that on the profit and loss statement, 14% of the wire was being returned every single month. Now, this is a specialty wire manufacturing company. This isn't wire that you buy at Home Depot, and if someone returns it, you put it back on the shelf. You basically have to scrap it. And what I noticed was there was no process that was being followed by the operators to manufacture the wire. So I'm a master black belt in Lean Six Sigma. I grab all the operators. I grab the head of manufacturing. We sit in a room for a half day. We put together this beautiful 9-step process. Everyone's going to follow. And my expectation is that returns in the next 2 months will drop to less than 5%. Well, a huge decrease. That doesn't happen. Drops from 14% down to 12%. Now I'm extremely frustrated by this. I know the process is really sound, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I'm standing there in the plant, and I'm noticing one of the operators on the machine, and I see them going through all the motions that they're making the wire, but I can't see the wire. So I go up to the machine operator, and it's a super thin wire. I said, hey, where's that wire going? He goes, I don't know. And so I call over Francisco, who's the plant manager. I said, hey, where's that wire going? He looks at the box and says, oh, that's going in Barado heart. That's going to go in a pacemaker. That operator goes, oh. My 9-step process is not working so well. So I grab Francisco. We go over to the next operator, go, where are those wires going? 8 wires coax together. Operator goes, I don't know. Well, that's going in the deep submergence vehicle. It's going to go down in the Marianas Trench. We went around that day to every single operator. No one knew where the wire was going. The next day we went around, 40% knew where the wire was going. The next day we went around, 80% knew. The next day we went around, 100% knew. We did that for the next 2 months. Returns dropped to 2%. And here's what I learned. What we did is we took the wire that they had and we made sure they understand the end use application and how it was impacting the human being. And when we did that, we opened up their heart. Then they invited the discipline in, and then we had the major impact. And it's a huge learning lesson for leaders. So the first part of the toolkit is you got to make sure your message is simple and clear and inspiring. And, Simon, Sinek, says, hey, start with why. I think we need to start with who. Who is being impacted by what you are doing, and make that connection for anybody that's in the company, how what they're doing connects to that. And that's the first thing that leaders need to do. I think we get this wrong. 70% of people don't feel connected to their company's culture and their company's mission. Like there's a massive underutilization, and it's not only for the success of the company, because engaged employees make a profitable company. Like this is just the right thing to do. Don't you want your people who are working there to go like, I cannot wait to start my day, and then end each day laying down on a pillow going like, my gosh, that was fantastic. It was hard. It was fantastic. I can't wait till tomorrow. And so the first part of the toolkit is to be able to do that. For anyone who's listening right now, typically we find that the mission statements are 42 words long. No one can remember it. If you can code word it, get it down to a code word, and then people will be able to remember it and show people how what they do makes a difference. That's the first step of the toolkit.
Was the reason the wire was getting returned because the employees didn't care, therefore they were being negligent?
I believe that there's a lot of different steps that you have to follow. Like, and we're talking about high performance environments, like on the deep submergence vehicle. And the company that gets the wire, they go through a QA set of testing. And if it's just crimped in the wrong part of the wire, of the 200 feet of wire, the whole thing gets returned. And so I think it was attention to detail, but it was, all they saw was a wire. They didn't know where the end use was. And so a lot of people will say like, well, that's the employee's fault. I think it's the leader's responsibility to make sure that people have this understanding. Hey, where is the wire going? There's another story. Lyndon Johnson went down to the Space Center in 1967. He was asking everybody there. And we hadn't put a man on the moon yet. In 1969 was that a man put on the moon. 1967, he's walking around the entire Space Center. And he's asking people, what do you do? Oh, I'm in the navigation part of it. Oh, I'm in the booster. I'm in logistics. And he comes up to a person and he says, hey, what do you do? And the person looks at him and says, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. He said, that's great, but what is your job here? And he goes, I'm the janitor. Like that's what we have to be able to show people, that, hey, someone in procurement is just buying this glue. But that glue is what's used in the medical devices that then the doctor uses to, help someone find where they have some type of disease. And we have to be really clear, because we assume that everyone knows as leaders, like they know that. If you make your message simple, clear, and inspiring, and then people can attach themselves to it. So that's the first part that we have to do. Everyone says, well, let's put a process in place and let's do that. Don't start with that. Start with, who's being impacted and how is what I'm doing making a difference in the world long term.
Other than simplicity and starting with who, where do most leaders go wrong in terms of how they think about leadership?
So the old way of leadership is, I'm the leader. I need to have all the answers. And when someone comes to me, I have to be involved in all the decisions. That is the old leadership model. Where, hey, I'm at the top. I'm making the decisions. I have to be involved in the decisions. That's what the employees are expecting of me. With the dynamically changing environment and world that we live in today, it's sped up too fast that leaders cannot be involved in every single decision. So I think the biggest mindset shift that a leader needs to make is that you don't have to have all the answers. There's this thing called Google. Everyone can find all of the answers to what needs to be done. What you are a person who is a facilitator. What you're trying to do is you're trying to take a look at the entire human capital that's in your company, and you are setting up a matrixed organizational framework. And so leaders feel really uncomfortable with this because the old framework is, I'm at the top, I have a status, I have a title, I'm expected to know all of these different answers. You don't need to do that anymore. You need to set up, hey, we have this challenge that just came in today. Okay, there's a person over here in this department. There's a person down here in this department. There's a person over here. There's a person over here. How do we take and form a team very quickly? How do they come to a conclusion and a decision? And how do we unform the team? And so what you are is you're a person who's taking a look at all the resources that are in the company. And then what you're doing is you're leaning into those resources and collectively solving the problem and manage change. So I think that's the biggest challenge that people are having.
It's like, I think Steve Jobs said this. He goes, why pay millions of dollars to hire people to tell me what to do, or for me to tell them what to do when I'm hiring the most intelligent people on the planet so they can tell me what to do?
Exactly.
And then the inverse as well. This has been fascinating. What would you say I know we've talked about a lot of different processes, a lot of different systems. What would you say are the maybe top 3 core values of an effective leader?
So I think, you know, the values that we have in our company is we have servant mind. So I think you have to have a servant mind. And a lot of people talk about servant mind and they immediately go to like Christianity, and that's not that. So I think the number one thing is you have to have a servant mind. Number two is I think you have to lead by example. So don't expect your people to do anything that you wouldn't do. Now, does that mean every single time that you are doing exactly what they need to do, and you're working in the business versus on the business? No. So I think lead by example, and I would say the final thing is fail fast.
Iterate quickly.
Very quickly. I mean, the submarine force, Kevin, we had this tremendous exactitude. The valve wasn't turned exactly the right way. If you overturned it, you would ruin the valve. If you underturned it, water would be flooded in the compartment. So we had this tremendous exactitude, but then we had to operate in an environment that had tremendous ambiguity too. And so we had to shift between these two mindsets of decision-making. And so you can't take the decision-making of exactitude and apply it to ambiguity, because you will just freeze. But you can't take the decision-making framework of ambiguity and apply it to exactitude, because you're going to have a lot of problems. Some of them could be life and death situations. So it's being able to shift in between those two. I would share with you that in the submarine force, I would make 8 decisions in 2 minutes. The first 7 would be totally wrong, but I allowed myself, and the team understood this too, that they had this. We would say, come right to here, come left, come right, come left. And the last one was the final decision. We didn't worry about the first 7 things that went wrong. That informed us so that we could get to success.
As you talk about this too, and as you shared a bit about leadership, how it's within everyone, use it or lose it. Share with me a story of either yourself or someone you witnessed that thought they weren't a leader, and something that they went through that they then came out of that experience showing to themselves that they were then a leader.
Yeah. So one of the first turnarounds that I did, I went in to the company. I wasn't the turnaround CEO. I was the turnaround chief operating officer. They had just fired the VP of operations, and the person probably shouldn't have been there. And so we are sitting there trying to find the person to be the replacement. And for me, I always try to take a look internal at people's capabilities and people's ability to connect with others. And I found a gentleman. At that time, he was 26 years old, and he was actually started by sweeping floors at this business, and it was a manufacturing facility. They were turning retail products, every single day. High performance. They needed to make sure that everything went out on time. They had a lot of failure. So I can remember talking with that person, and I said, "Hey, I think you're going to be the next VP of Ops." And he looked at me like I was nuts. He looked at me like I was crazy. And so he started asking me some questions. He said, "Well, why do you say that?" And he exhibited a lot of these skills and tools of making sure that people understood what they were doing was making a difference in the world. The way he approached people was from a mindset of a servant mindset, and he was okay with failing fast and then allowing success to be set for course correct. But I was able to shift his mindset. The really funny story, though, is when I went to the CEO of the company and I said, "I found your VP of Ops." And he says, "Okay, when are you going to bring him in to have an interview?" I said, "He's inside the building." It's like, stunned silence. He's trying to go through the whole roster of employees. Like, who is it, right? And I said, "Hey, it's Scott." And he looked at me like I was nuts. Looked at me like I was absolutely crazy nuts. Now, the story he tells 2 years later is he said, "Mark, in my mind, I was thinking, why am I paying all of this money for your advice when you're representing Scott? And that's your recommendation." Scott turned out to be fantastic. He drove the tremendous profitability of the company, the team culture and everything. And it's so fun. It's so fun to see that when they don't realize that they have it. And I think the reason why a lot of people don't realize they have it is because they have this thing where they've seen some, movie, and it's like, leadership is so complicated. It's not. It's about what are you doing every single day. And it's like, if you want your biceps to be like really, popping and have guns and everything, you can't just lift the weight once in a month and go, hey, I'm going to get the results. And so what we've done is, and what the Navy did for me is it broke down leadership into a few simple components that you do every single day. And the power is in the consistency of doing it every single day. And so to see him rise up, I got to tell you, everyone in the company, they were just applauding him because he was one of them, right? And he was able to rise up, and it was such a powerful story. And to this day, he's killing it.
Do you always recommend companies hire from within then?
I think if you can, I think it's the best. We're talking about internal mobility. People want to have the ability to rise up and be developed. And I think it's a great story, because you know what other people look at, they see that and they go, oh, they're not just going to go outside. Like, they're going to look at me first. And we have to combine that with, though, giving them this ladder. We talked about in the beginning about the Navy giving me a ladder of what it looks like. We have to be able to give them like a learning and development ladder to say, hey, here's where you are right now, and here's where you need to get to in the future. It does massive, has a massive impact on the entire culture when someone from within is hired and brought up.
With the expanse of technology, AI, the remote work, everything's virtual, are there any challenges that you see leaders facing today that are different than would have been faced previous? Or where should a leader's mindset be present day, knowing that a lot of the work is moving towards a virtual, technological, advanced society?
Yeah. So I didn't come up with this, but I heard it the other day, and I think it's really powerful. Everyone's talking about AI is going to take over. And I heard someone say, AI will not replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. And so we have to have, and we talked about leadership. You have to have an open mindset to learn. So I think it's really important that we take a look at a lot of the things that have to do with AI. We have to incorporate that. What are the major challenges? Pre-COVID, culture was associated with a location. It was associated with an office where everyone went to. So all the activities, everything that a leader did was about, hey, how do I have this happen at that location? Well, we know what happened. Everyone got sent home. And what we believe is, if you some of the things we talked about earlier, if you engage, if you empower and you encourage someone every single day, culture is not about a location. Culture is about wherever an employee is working, it's in their heart. And so we believe that that's really important, that leaders, have that understanding. So one of the big challenges is we have some people who are working 5 days remote. We have some people who want to work hybrid. The statistics are clear. If you can offer a hybrid opportunity, it's the most productive. And I don't see why you can't. But I think we're fooling ourselves if we think we can create a high-performance team with people working 100% remote. And the statistics just recently released from Gallup, back that up. The people who are working remote, you might think that they're the highest engaged. They're not the highest engaged. And so I think, the big challenge for leaders is, and we've had this return to work, return to office. And for employees, especially, Gen Z and Gen Y, have had this tremendous freedom. What they're hearing is, hey, you need to come back to the office. And what they're feeling from their leaders is, I don't trust you to work at home anymore. And what really leaders have to do, we have to communicate better, because you have to be able to tell people, hey, the reason why you should get up 45 minutes early and be able to not only just have a shirt on, but you got to put the pants on underneath, and you want to drive to work is here's why. Oxytocin's not released. If you and I are doing this virtually, it's not released. The love hormone, all of the serotonin, the unintentional collisions that happen at the office. And so I think if we tell people the why behind, we want to have a hybrid opportunity, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday, everyone's in the office, and Tuesday, Thursday, you can work someone else. So I think that is one of the huge challenges that we're going to continue to deal with. And, people 87% of employees want to have some type of hybrid opportunity. If you are not offering it, your 87% of the workforce in the United States is looking at going, well, that's not a primary job for me. So I think that's another one. And then I would say the final thing is just communication. Have to over communicate. Like my generation was no news is good news. Generation Y and Generation Z, they want connection, they want feedback, they want it every single day. How did I do? What happened? So if you're not doing like at least one-on-ones every 2 weeks with each one of your direct reports, you're missing out. If you're not doing a daily meeting every single day to connect people and have that, I think you're missing out. So there's some skills and tools that you have to have. And then the challenges of, a lot of people want to take that leaders of like, hey, when is it going to go back? I want to put the, toothpaste back in the tube. It's not going back. And so I think those are the big challenges and the mindset shift of employees, biggest mindset shift in the last 100 years.
Yeah.
And so it's dealing with that. I believe that I deeply believe that inside every single person is the wanting to belong to something bigger than themselves. And we as a leader, we have to make our message really simple and clear, and we're not doing a good enough job at that. I think it all starts with that. So if there's one thing to say like, hey, what do I start with? Go around to everybody who you're working with and say, hey, what do you think our brand purpose is? Or what do you think our mission statement is? We've done this with companies, over 500 companies. On average, teams are 9% aligned. What's the mission statement? What's the vision? What are the top 3 annual goals? What are our top 5 values? 9%. Like, would you climb Mount Everest with a team that's 9% aligned? You just wouldn't. So why are we operating our companies? And that's when people were all in the same office. Now we got them remote and all that type of stuff. So I think if I were to say like, what's like one thing to start with, like start with your mission statement. Make sure it's simple, clear. Everything else will flow from that.
Yeah. Did a great job maintaining that train of thought too, with Loka in the background going crazy.
Like I told you, when stuff happens, you just go.
Mm-hmm. Well, Marc, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on. I really appreciate you coming out and diving deep into leadership today with me. The final question I have for you as it pertains to the podcast itself, inputs only, the inputs
Sure.
within your control that dictate the outcomes you desire. In regards to inputs and in regards specifically to leadership, which input of yours as it relates to leadership has provided the largest return?
Again, I would go to getting the purpose right. Because when you get the purpose right, then you open up people's hearts and then they'll invite the discipline in. So I think the number one input is you have control over this. Look, there's outside the 4 walls of our business, we got, there's a war going on, there's inflation, there's supply chain issues, there's an election coming up later this year, and we can get massively distracted by that. We have no control over that stuff. What we have control over is inside of our business, is inside of our team, is the ability to connect with our people, to their heart and to their mind. And so if I were to say, like, what's the one input that we have control over? We have control over getting really clear on our purpose and our message, and then making sure every single day, just write it down. And then at the end, check it off and connect people to the mission. Because once you open up their heart, then they'll go above and beyond on their own. Talk about accountability. You don't have to hold people accountable who love what they're doing And then you can give them more autonomy, and that's what employees want. So I would start with the one input is make sure your purpose is clear, compelling, and it's inspiring.
Mark, thank you.
You're welcome.